This happened in 1976, when I was 10. It isn't very dramatic, but it was quite scary enough for me. I was at a Covenant boarding school in rural Norfolk, UK. The school was shaped like a squared-off C, with the fourth-year classroom at the bottom right at ground level with the third-year classroom, between it and the rest of the school. A corridor ran from the fourth-year classroom and past the third. It had a strip of window at the top, but above my head height, so I couldn't see into the classroom from outside. At weekends, the pupils were allowed to watch TV after tea and before bed. Toward the end of the tea, 2 girls would be sent to the fourth-year classroom to put chairs out, as this was where the only TV was. One winter evening, my friend Geraldine and I were chosen for this job. I finished tea before her and set off for the classroom. I got into the fourth-year classroom, and before I could put the lights on, I heard something from the third-year room I had just passed. It sounded like shuffling, and desks being nudged, and chairs moved. I still couldn't see into the room, but the sounds were moving towards the door of the room. It seemed that whatever made the noise would get to the door before I could run past it and back to the main part of the school. At that time of day, every member in the tiny school was in the kitchen or dining room. No one would be in that classroom in the dark. As I stood there, Geraldine came down the corridor. The noises stopped abruptly, and I switched the light on in the fourth-year room. I felt I had almost been trapped by something, but characteristically for me, I didn't say anything about it. We got the room ready for TV watching. Later that winter, a couple of third-year girls had permission to go into their classroom after dark to fetch something. They didn't bother with the lights. I heard this story in some detail. In the room, they saw a small figure that laughed at them. It was definitely not anyone from the school. They ran out screaming, and after this, no one was allowed into that part of the school at night, and no explanation was given. I'm just glad I never got to see whatever the hell it was.
This happened between August and December of 2012 in Arkansas. I admit, I'm an amateur ghost hunter. On one ghost hunting trip to an old hospital, I witnessed something very strange. It was lying on the filthy floor watching us. I wasn't startled by it as I normally would have been. The figure was very, very long. If it had stood up, it would have easily taken up 2 stories. I reported the incident, and we went about our business. A few weeks later, near Halloween, we were asked to come look through a commercial haunted house by the operator. My team leader decided it wasn't an official investigation, so we could use an Ouija board. I sat out the session, but we recorded the incident. We received the spirit of a little boy, and then a more obnoxious spirit, closer to a demonic one, that had been known to cause problems for my team leader throughout her life. Suddenly, we could see that something was causing the board to move. Its answers became more respectful, I guess you could say. It identified itself as Death, a Grim Reaper, and indicated in its answers that it was one of many, and that we had seen this same spirit once before at the hospital. After it was over and the Reaper left, we once more went about our business. Not long after that, my grandfather died. About 8 hours before, I was falling asleep and saw a very large, tall figure in my room. It was hunched over to avoid hitting the ceiling. It looked just like the Reaper I had seen. I went to tell my mother what I had seen, and I felt my grandfather's time had come. He was dead at 11 that morning. I stayed home from work, and that evening, I was walking up the hall to bring my drink glass from my room when I spotted a dark figure in the living room. It was shorter than I was, but it looked so solid, more like an actual person was in the room with me. I thought that someone had broken into the house and froze. The figure saw me, turned to face me, and headed my way. It opened its arms and jumped at me, just as I threw the hall light on to see nothing in the room with me. I freaked out and ran back to my room and sat on the bed, staring at the door for an hour. It wasn't until I was talking with my team leader about it that I realized that the figure must have been my grandfather, trying to give me one last hug. He still comes to the house frequently.
This happened in 1998 in the community of Pittsburgh, California. It was summertime, and my wife and I had just moved into our first house. It was an old house, but it was still in good shape. The only thing that needed some attention was the front and backyard. They were overgrown with weeds and bushes. The previous owners designed the front to look like Arizona. Instead of grass, they planted a variety of cacti and other desert plants. They had rocks placed in a way that formed a trail that went over a dried creek courtesy of a homemade bridge. They even placed skulls of cattle here and there to give it a bit more authenticity. It was alright, but we wanted grass. We knew it was going to be a lot of work for just my wife and I, so we called our good friend David to see if he could lend us a hand. David was a hard worker and a handyman. He could do a lot of things. He knew how to drywall, paint, landscape, tear down, remodel. He could even do some electrical and some plumbing work. Besides, we hadn't seen him in a long time. So I called him, and he said he'd come over the next day to help out. He arrived early in the morning, ready to go. I told him what we wanted to do, and he chipped in with some advice on what would be the best way to go about it. My wife Tina and I decided to have a barbecue at the end of the day, and drink some beers and catch up on some things. While Tina and a friend of hers went shopping, David and I began the work. As usual, David was doing his thing, kicking up a lot of dust as he proceeded pulling up cacti, weeds, stones, and throwing them into a trailer I had rented. I was leveling the ground that David had cleared with a hoe and shovel. It was then that David went to the part of the yard that was next to the sidewalk and street. I was on the opposite side that was next to the fence that separated my house from the neighbors. It was starting to get hot, and I remember David taking off his shirt. Then as I watched him, he looked in the direction towards the side of the house. Suddenly, this expression came over his face, as if he'd just seen a terrible accident. His eyes were wide, and it seemed like he was saying something to himself. He threw his shirt on the ground and ran forward towards what he was seeing, until he disappeared around the side of the house. I quickly ran over there too, but when I turned the corner, David wasn't there. I opened the gate in the fence that led to the backyard, but he wasn't there either. I went back to the front and looked around some more, at the same time calling out to him. Then I searched inside the house, but David was nowhere to be found. I kept looking for him until Tina arrived. Soon, we were all looking for David. At one point, we thought he might be playing a joke and hiding from us, but that wasn't likely, because more than 2 hours had passed, and he wasn't the type to carry a joke on for that long, especially when there was work to be done. We expanded our search to include the whole block. We checked convenience stores, we called friends, we even asked strangers if they had seen him. David would have been easy to remember if they had seen him, because physically he stood out. He was tall, lanky, and had a long ponytail. No one had seen anyone fitting that description. We couldn't figure out what could have happened to David. Maybe he'd hopped on a car that pulled over and he would return later, but that just didn't make any sense to us. We continued our search for the next several days, which included many of his friends. We also put out flyers with his picture on him. There was just no sign of him. We didn't involve the police because David had some warrants out on him. All we could do was hope that he would turn up. It's like he just disappeared. We kept an eye on his car, which he had parked in front of our house. Eventually, we moved it inside the garage for safekeeping. That day long ago, David saw something startling just before he vanished without a trace. What he saw, I don't know.
I bought an older home in Fargo, North Dakota in the spring of 2002. At first, I didn't pay any attention to the noises and the lights flickering because of its age. In the first few weeks, I would see someone run by my window in the backyard. I would run out and try to catch them, but never saw anyone and wondered how they could run down the side of the house so fast. All I could see of him was a black shape of a man from the waist up going by. It took some time before I realized that the guy would have had to been 10 feet tall for me to see him through the window. I'm 5 feet 6 inches tall, and the bottom of the window is a few inches above me. I still didn't think anything of the noises and the flickering lights. I was sitting on the couch, and an orb came from an outside wall in my staircase and into the other wall. The other time I saw them was during the day, and two orbs, one behind the other, egg-shaped and solid white, went about 4 feet off the ground across my living room and disappeared. Again, I was sitting on my couch with my cat, and we both watched them go by. My cat couldn't have cared less, and they didn't frighten me either. I'm not looking for odd things to happen, so I didn't notice it unless it was in my face. I had moved in a dresser and left it at the bottom of the stairs because I didn't feel like hauling it up to the second floor yet. That evening, I heard a loud noise in the area and just thought it was something falling down the stairs. I put stuff on my stairs and would take it up all at once instead of a bunch of trips. When I went there the next day, a drawer was open, and not just a little, it was pulled almost all the way out. Then I became frightened. During the winter, I put plastic on the windows to keep the cold out. The tape that I used takes the paint off when removed if you're not careful enough. Right in front of me, the plastic was ripped halfway off the full-size window. For about 15 years, I've had problems with the pictures I had taken with white streaks and light spots on them. I thought it was where I was getting them developed, so I took them to 4 different places, hoping to correct the problem. I've had 3 different cameras over this time, and so I knew it wasn't that. I had thrown some away, thinking that they were just developed wrong, and now I wish I hadn't. I never thought they were anything paranormal. I've just stopped taking pictures. Over time, almost everything has stopped, but for a few noises and lights flickering that I've hardly noticed. Now it's January 2016, and I've heard some loud noises, my lights are flickering again, and too many bulbs are going out, but it's an old house. What I can't explain is all my electronics are not working properly. My coffee pot I love started leaking, and my gas stove I used to heat my house stopped working all in the same week.
What's up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end. Sorry that this episode's a little shorter than usual. I've been a little bit busy lately, which is part of why I haven't been able to put out as many videos lately. But hopefully that's going to get fixed up soon, and we're going to get back to our regular schedule real quick here. Joining me this episode was the Horror Dimension. He's actually one of my favorite guys, and one of the inspirations for why I started this channel in the first place. So I'll have a link to his channel in the description below. If you liked his narrations, be sure to check him out. As always as well, there will be links to all of my social media, including Facebook, Twitter, and my Gmail in the description below. If you have any stories you'd like me to read, or any stories that you'd like to send in yourself, feel free to shoot me a message on any of those, and I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. If you have any constructive criticism, please feel free to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a great day.